Larry and I first met the day we both arrived at UConn, which was on or about July 1, 1974, almost 37 years ago. Hard to believe, but that's the way it is. And it was clear right away that he was unique. He was not like the rest of us, a bred-out, buttoned-up academic. He was more, I'd say, like a terrier. He was muscular, he was tough, he was bouncy, endlessly curious about people, almost never wore a necktie, and he referred to that article of clothing as the noose. As I tried to think about a single adjective that would describe Larry, it seemed to me that the word hungry was as good as any. He really did have an insatiable appetite for virtually anything and everything the world has to offer. He was hungry for places. He traveled everywhere he could find a reason or an excuse to go. 10 trips to Australia, I think, and countless trips to India and all over Europe. He was hungry for the outdoors, particularly through sports. In addition to his windsurfing obsession, he was a hiker and a skier. He was hungry for food, every kind of cuisine. And so it particularly rankled him that when in the last year of his life the chemotherapy destroyed his taste for much of many of the things he loved to eat. So my wife, Anne, and I did learn that one of the few things he could eat during that period was minestrone. So we're particularly glad that the last time he and Helen came to dinner at our house, he was able to eat the minestrone we made from vegetables from the garden. 3 bowls of it, as I remember. Most importantly, Larry was hungry to learn, to discover, and to find out what made things tick. Now, everyone on the UConn faculty, as I think you've really already heard, shares the memory of Larry's unique way of attending medical grand rounds. And my recollection of that is slightly different from some of the other speakers, and that is because during the presentations at the grand rounds, as I recall it, unlike everyone else who was sitting up and at least seemed to be paying attention and listening, Larry would be sitting there reading journals. Now, for most ordinary mortals, reading journals during a lecture would mean that by the time the lecture was over, that person would have very little idea of what the lecture was about. But during the discussion period that followed the presentation, Larry would always raise his hand and ask a highly pertinent question or two. Now, this made it abundantly clear to everyone, including the speaker, that not only had Larry listened to what the speaker said, but he had gotten it better than most of us had. In effect, Larry's way of being at grand rounds was telling us, if interesting and important new information is available from 2 high-level, high-density sources at once, why settle for one? Before I end, I need to also bring a message from my brother-in-law, Jules Hirsch, who very much wanted you all to know that his thoughts are with us today. Jules spent his entire biomedical research career at the Rockefeller University and was the director of the university hospital there, and he knew Larry well. He told me last night that Larry was, in Jules's view, one of what he calls an endangered species, and that is the physician-investigator. And what Jules meant by that is that for physician investigators, the proper subject of investigation is a sick patient, rather than a length of DNA, or a drug molecule, or a specific medical procedure. And one important expression of that commitment on Larry's part was Larry's enormous support of the organization called the Association for Patient-Oriented Research, APOR, that Jules and Larry and other like-minded physician investigators founded over 10 years ago. And this work has been a kind of living embodiment of Fuller Albright's clinical research tradition, which Albright described so well in his little book called Uncharted Seas. In preparing some of these thoughts for today, I discovered on Google Scholar that Larry had reviewed that book in 1991 for the Journal of the American Medical Association, and it served him as a beacon for the rest of his life. So let me close now by simply adding my farewell to this fascinating talented, tireless man, Larry Raisz, the hungry man, whose insatiable appetite for knowing has been such a gift to us all.